Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Laurence Colletti, executive producer at Legal Talk Network, where as a podcaster he has shared countless people's stories, and some, like For the Innocent Project, can change a life for good. Welcome to LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm excited and thrilled, actually, to have our guest on today, Laurence Colletti, who himself is a podcasting maven and one that I can learn a lot from. And I know that you all will be able to learn a lot from today. So with that, let me introduce Laurence and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Tom, for the kind words. I don't know about Maven, but we've been doing this for just a little bit now, and very fun industry and all that. Yeah, I got started back in 2014. So I will say it's probably the first time of my entire career that I was in the right place at the right time. This was shortly before Serial really hit, and there was a lot of confluence in technology that was going on at the same time. And so mobile broadband was definitely, improving to a point where people weren't afraid to use their data to download, and the app market was beginning to expand. So it was a really great time to be in the industry with all those confluencing software forces all at once. So yeah.
Yeah, and for all of you watching or listening that may not be aware, Laurence is the executive producer of the Legal Talk Network. And with that, he, has experience interviewing probably thousands at this point of people, or at least hundreds.
Yeah, I think it's hundreds, but yeah, 1,000 would be something pretty tremendous, yeah, probably hundreds at this point.
Yeah, and so I was saying when we talked a little bit before we started that it's fitting that it's 10 years, you've been doing this, and I think that you have a really like a wealth of experience because you got into it before it was cool, so to speak. Like the whole content creation ecosystem that exists now was something that was like in its nascent state 10 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about how it was then versus how it is now?
Sure. So, I kind of rewind a little bit back before I started at the network. And, podcasting has been around a while. Our network actually started operating back in 2005. So pre-app world, kind of, I think that's pre-iPhone as well. Content back then was really kind of locally hosted. You hosted it on your server. And so I used to have an adventure sports mapping company back in the day when I graduated law school, and I used to make, short form video and short form audio explaining a park system that we had just mapped out. And social media had just kind of come on, and was beginning to really grow pretty quickly. And so, post updates and things like that. So it was always short form content, but I was always very passionate about media when I was a kid. My friends and I built this little makeshift homemade editing box, and basically throwing switches and trying to change audio channels. We were making a rip-off movie of the Terminator. And so we really got into it, and so frame by frame, and we would do these long reels of improved sound and everything like that with sound effects plugged in. But yeah, that was kind of the old days. Now, the app market is really big, and you really can't get anywhere. Obviously, I think most people know this, without a social media strategy. And so it's not just about posting once in a while. You need to post regularly. And with the frequency, your presence grows online. I don't understand entirely the algorithms, but I do know that when you're not posting regularly, you fall, and you're not getting noticed as much, and those boosts that you get from new content decrease. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's something I definitely need to keep in mind with what I'm doing here. Um, okay, so by the way, that Terminator remix that you made, do you have that anywhere? Have you posted it on YouTube?
I think that's in my mom's attic somewhere, and gratefully no one's seen it but me and my friends. So
So you actually were in JD MBA, right, at Leola?
that's correct.
And has the business, like education part of it, like has that informed what you've done with with the podcast and your approach to it at all?
I think my business training that I had, I definitely have made more money with that than my law degree for sure. I think in terms of managing projects and things like that, I think that that training for my master's was, very instructional. So kind of helped me organize projects and help me push them through, work with teams and things like that. So I think there's a lot of great background there. But also, there's some aspect of planning where you're going to get some spreadsheets out and you're going to plan something out over a long term, and you have to budget, try to figure things out and make sure that everything fits together. You need to be able to analyze data. And so I think that definitely helped, right now in terms of understanding the podcasting market.
And I understand your role has changed a little bit over time with the Legal Talk Network. If you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Sure. So I started on as just a producer, and over time, as we grew pretty quickly since we acquired the network. So we didn't found the network, we bought it, and they plugged me in to kind of help grow it. And so I got promoted to executive producer, which I remained executive producer for a very long time. And then recently, we've been purchased by InfoTrack. And so there's been some shuffling of the chairs on the deck. And now I'm the director of special projects.
So what are special projects?
That is a good question. So, so it's we right now we have one special project that we're working with, formerly known as the California Innocence Project. It's since changed entity names. It's the Innocence Center now, and we have a show with them now called For the Innocent. It used to be called the California Innocence Project podcast. And so that's one of the special projects. That was one where we're taking kind of a deviation from our normal. As people that have listened to the network for years, no, we do a lot of, interview formatted shows. And this one's a little bit more narrative tone, a little bit of storytelling, but it's really about the true life accounts of people that went to prison for crimes they didn't commit. And it took many years to get them out. Some of them serving, 20, 30 years behind bars for a murder that somebody else actually did. And this is about the legal team that gets them out. It's about the exoneree, the person that eventually is found innocent. And we first get the story in their own voice, and we listen to them in their own words describe what happened to them and how their life was turned upside down through wrongful incarceration. And then we learn about their journey out. And after we hear from the exoneree, there's usually some follow-up episodes that explain what went wrong in this case. Like there's some cracks in our system, our criminal justice system. And my observation is that I think most people working in the criminal justice system have really good intentions. It's just that sometimes the cogs of the gears of our criminal justice system don't always line up. People can slip through the cracks, and sometimes you do have bad actors. And unfortunately, that means that innocent people get ensnared for crimes they didn't commit.
Wow. It's a bit mind-blowing that, I mean, when we go to law school, we, learn about how it's better to let, you know, 10 guilty men go free than to have one unlawfully spend the rest of their life in prison. And it seems like maybe that happens more often than we think.
That was kind of my big eye opener. And I remember leaving a tour of the California Innocence Project back when it's called that, and just thinking about how many years and decades of people's lives got taken from them, their freedom. And I walked out of that tour with the executive director, Michael Semanchik of the Innocence Center now. And I called my boss, Adam Cameras, at the time. I said, "Hey, we got to do a show with these guys. This is something I wasn't aware of. This is one of the most meaningful days I've had on the job. I just learned something new. I'd always worked with contracts and, help businesses, make more money. I'd always help them with their operating agreements or landlord tenant agreements or something like that. And, worst case scenario, people lose money in that deal, but they don't lose their freedom, and they're not accused of horrifying crimes and they're not abandoned and thrown out by society. And I just looked at these stories and you could see the hurt on people's faces. And you can also see the joy when they suddenly regain their freedom. And I just knew that we had to do something to bring some of these stories to life. So that quickly became a very, it's a project, a passion project now, something I'll pour a lot of extra time and energy into these days.
Wow. That sounds amazing and a really good cause to highlight. Um, Amongst the different like shows that you have, how many shows are going on right now for the Legal Talk Network?
We've got just north of 30 of them, and they have all different types of content. We have some for legal marketing. We have some that are practice management specific. We have some that are dedicated to specific areas of law, and we have some current events ones and some storytelling ones as well.
What are the storytelling ones?
We have 2 primary ones right now. So, one that's been kind of put into production, Mothballs, Make No Law, which is one of my favorites. So we worked with Ken White, who's a, free speech commentator. You'll see him sometimes on CNN and other, network news whenever there's a free speech, challenge there, and he came on and hosted a bunch of episodes. It was wonderful. We did a Foley in the studio, so which means sound effects, which was a lot of fun, and so, there's a few episodes in there that we made some pretty cringy sound effects there, which I listen to and get a little grossed out, but that's the whole idea. And so that was a lot of fun, that show to work on. There's wonderful music, and that was one where I worked with our head audio engineer Adam Lockwood, and a lot of that stuff is originally scored by him. And so it's wonderful to incorporate his talents into that show. And so that was a fun one. That was one of our storytelling narratives. And the next one, of course, is the one that we're working on now, the For the Innocent podcast, where we are bringing stories to life, and so we are telling the stories of exonerees, and so that's the other storytelling narrative that we have.
So lawyers that are listening to this, they probably understand that at this point, it actually is all of us that benefits from creating content. Lawyers, when they talk about what they do, like let's say it's, I don't know, estate planning. Um, the more they talk about that, the more they engage with people, the more people see them, know who they are and want to engage with them. And it's just this educational marketing, flywheel that gets created. Like what tips would you have for them about how they can start that flywheel?
Well, when you ask that question, the first quote that comes to mind is from a friend of mine. His name's Sean Vossler, and he has an artificial intelligence book writing company called Movable Type. And one of the things that he says is that we are all content. And so, he'll put examples up like that. He has a little turtle. He makes aquariums in his spare time, and he has this turtle called Thomas. And Thomas is always trying to escape the aquarium, and so this becomes kind of a routine thing that he features in his social media channels. But we all have a story that we should be sharing. And all of our professions have a message and are useful to other people. And I think in terms of that content strategy, we're all content. What we do, everything we do is content. It's a matter of taking what we know, who we are, and what we do, and aiming it towards the audience that's looking for that. And so I think in this world, it's wonderful. You kind of have this relationship with people you haven't met. I'm sure there's people, Tom, that you follow on Instagram, that you enjoy watching their reels, whether it's fishing or, watch building or model trains or I don't know, fitness. There's somebody out there that you routinely tune into. There's something about them that resonates with you, and they're just telling their story. They're talking about their business, they're talking about their expertise. And so, that's the real marketing now. I find that to be that kind of person to person marketing the most impactful, because you build, a very sincere relationship with somebody you haven't even met.
Yeah, there's all kinds of content out there. On TikTok, there's all kinds of crazy things. I know that like there's restoration videos that I've really gotten into where they take like an old tool and then it's all like rusty and they bring it back to life. Um, but what about that? What about the flip side of it? Like some people might be thinking there's w- there's too much content out there. Like, am I gonna just be lost amongst it? What's the point really of me contributing to this when I might not even get noticed?
Well, I'm in a old enough to remember the Dewey Decimal System, but young enough to understand social media as well. And I remember the days before. You had these things. How lost were you looking for something or searching for a hobby or trying to get information? I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I would ride around with my grandpa in his car, and I'd read maps, right? And sometimes we'd have to try to find an address. You'd look this up in the back of a phone book, and you'd have to try to find it on a map, and it'd give you a grid and how long that took. And so in terms of being lost, I think that I think we have more answers than I think that we're currently able to process, super effectively. But I think that's getting better over time. You think about how easy it is to find something like when you want to go out for dinner, if your reservations get canceled, how easy is that? You don't just go to the restaurant you went to before. You happen to be standing, within a quarter mile of some, wonderful taco stand or something like that to bring your date on. And so how quickly that information comes. So I think the new learning requires us to filter out noise, which we're not real good at, but hopefully one day with a little bit of mindfulness, we will be.
Yeah. So what's one piece of advice you would give to them about how to start?
What do you mean, start with like utilizing social media or trying to manage the fire hose of information that comes at us?
Yeah, probably both. But look, I was thinking like, what's one piece of advice that you would give for lawyers about how to start uh, with creating content? Like maybe it's a YouTube video, maybe it's just a 1 minute, uh, you know, recording that they could put on TikTok. Like, what do you think would be the best way for them to get started that is low impact, low stress?
So low impact, low stress. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind when you want to do a content building strategy, when you want to start marketing what you do, is to be consistent. So no matter what you do, keep whether it's writing, whether it's audio or video, keep it on schedule. And that people do look for you. And so and because there's so much competition, when they expect you to have new content up and you don't deliver,
Mhm.
they'll move on. They'll try to find something else to fill that void. They were waiting for it. And so, I think writing's a great place. Lawyers are naturally pretty good writers. By the time you get out of law school, take the bar and, have all that stuff beat into your head, you're usually a pretty good writer. And so I think that that's a strength that all lawyers can take advantage of. And there's a lot of blogging options. And I know that's a little bit older school type of social media, but it does have a certain authority of authorship that is different than say a quick post in LinkedIn, which is also a wonderful thing to do. Definitely I would say probably more trustworthy than a TikTok post or an Instagram post. Those are more fun. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of wonderful information on those social media platforms, but something in writing coming from a lawyer that they took time to do and published and is part of a growing body of work certainly carries with it more authority. So I think that that's probably one that I would recommend to start with and see how comfortable you are with that. And if you find that that's something that's sustainable, then maybe start looking into doing some audio production or video production. A lot of people have a lot of lawyer friends that are just doing quick videos with their phone. If there's a law update or if it's coming up tax season or what have you, whatever information is pertinent needs to get out there, and they'll do a quick little video. I would just keep it short, but also keep it on a schedule. You definitely don't want to, you don't want people turning away when they expect you to deliver content. So I think that's kind of the overarching message is try to make it sustainable. If you go into audio, and maybe this is just because I'm a podcaster, um, and because that it's I think commercially affordable, I highly recommend people to get professional equipment. It does not cost as much as it used to, and I do recommend planning out your podcast 6 months of episodes. Try to figure out what your frequency is, and in terms of starting, we work with companies. The minimal frequency we use is a monthly publication schedule, and more and more I'm finding that that's probably not enough. So I would look to try to get something on twice a month as quickly as you can. And if you can, and even if they're shorter episodes, weekly is probably the best. And so once you kind of get to that, and you get used to it, you really are creating some big space and developing, reputation. That's the kind of stuff that gets you invited to conferences and public speaking events and things like that. And that really gets your name out there. But that's my advice. Be consistent. Hire some professionals to help you with your audio quality, and use some professional gear. It's a very competitive market, and lawyers are lawyers, and they need to put their best foot in front of them.
Well, thank you for that. And I know that we kind of jumped into the weeds about podcasting because naturally that's what you're doing right now, but I wanted to go back a little bit and find out a little bit about growing up, where you grew up, why law? Like why JD MBA? Like what brought you to that place?
Well, so I grew up in Kansas. I am a military brat. My dad was Air Force, so he was the Strategic Air Command commander, and so his mission was to fly refuelers. And so we moved around quite a bit when I was a kid. And anyway, he eventually got out and decided to go to dental school. And eventually, the long play was to become an orthodontist. So we moved around a lot. So I got to see a lot of new things. I got to meet a lot of new people. I really enjoyed talking to people. And there was a lot of driving time. We'd go drive to see relatives. And my dad, we're back and forth doing stuff as he's built his practice. And a lot of times we'd listen to talk radio together. And so that really got me interested in the space. And I would listen to that, and I just love the way people explain things. And there was this, and I know, times move on, and sometimes people have visceral reactions to characters. So, not to get political here, there was a show on that featured two diametrically opposed legal commentators. One was Erwin Chemerinsky, of course, the dean of Berkeley Law, and the other one was John Eastman. And so he was also a dean of a law school here in California. And anyway, they used to have completely different viewpoints on a Supreme Court case. And I learned more in their disagreements than I did from either one of them if I thought one was more right than the other. And that really kind of got me into law. I got to thinking about that. This really is sort of the fabric of our society. And I really enjoyed the civil discourse of being able to have a disagreement with somebody who had a completely different frame of thinking than you did. And that was the experience I had in law school when I got there. I was definitely driven for that. I thought, how wonderful would this be to be able to kind of learn about the law and harness it to build businesses and help people have these, their little piece of the pie, their little empire. That was kind of my thing, was a business law guy. And I had a wonderful experience in law school. I think it was back in the days when it was okay to disagree. We used to have these robust, shouting matches out at the bars when I was in law school, and we were dusting off our advocacy skills. And we were all friends, and we definitely would disagree all the time, sometimes in a shouting match. But at the end of the debate, we're all still pals, and we still bought rounds of beers for each other. And what it was a debate. That's all it was. But today, it breaks my heart. I do see that people are having a really hard time getting along with people that feel differently than them. And I want to just put this out there for whatever it's worth to anybody listening, if they'll hear it. You know, I've changed my mind on a lot of things because I had friends who cared enough to disagree with me. And although at one time I felt very strongly against something they believed, over time I thought about what they told me. And I made changes in the way that I thought about things simply because somebody cared enough to have a different opinion and express it to me.
I think that maybe one thing that lawyers actually can contribute to the public at large is that it is a debate. That it is possible to have civil disagreements and discourse, because as lawyers, that is something that we're kind of trained to be able to do, and to keep, even if not always a professional distance, that we can be professional about it, even though we disagree. And I completely hear you. 100, 1,000%, that when it comes to people talking, regular people, like, a lot of times it falls into these two different belief camps, and then nobody's hearing each other anymore. So maybe that's one thing that lawyers can do a good job of, getting people to speak to each other, or at least hear each other.
Yeah, I think so. And at the end of the day, as advocates in a court system, where we civilly, work through unworkable problems. If there's a property dispute or, like probably the worst thing, custody dispute with children, there's a system, there's rules that apply to everybody. And we go to court and we advocate on behalf of our client. And we have two people that feel very passionately in different directions. And the decision that comes out of that is going to impact one of them more than the other. But there's a set of rules and there's a way to do it in a way that's civil, and so I think that that's something at our core as lawyers we understand because we deal with people we disagree with all the time. And I agree with you, Tom. I think we should set an example out there. I think if any lawyer out there that has some friends that are like slewing about some political opinions and you have some arguments in there, it's like go in there and referee the debate, and make it fun because we should enjoy our disagreements as much as we can. I know that not everyone are we going to be able to, but that's one of those things that value add that I think lawyers can bring. It's like, that's a good point, but how do you feel about this? Maybe referee one of those debates between your friends and pass it along. It's okay to disagree.
Lawrence, I'm getting like maybe some podcasting ideas here. Maybe it would be a good idea to have a podcast where you have two people going at it, disagreeing about some subject, where people can learn, can intuitively get from that there's different ways of disagreeing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, and I've tried to float this, try to float a great debate podcast out there somewhere where you can have, and I think you should talk about some controversial issues. But I think if you did have some people that are diametrically opposed, set a good example. Said, I really don't like what you believe. However, I respect you as a person, and I'm going to comport my disagreement in a civil way with you, in exchange for the same. You let each other talk, let them finish their thought. I do think there ought to be some rules. You can't let somebody go on a 10-minute dialogue, but try to keep it concise, brief, and professional.
And one of the things you mentioned is that, you know, that you would experience sometimes when talking to a friend or debating them, that they might transform your opinion about something. Um, so keeping on that theme of transformation, um, good segue there, right?
That's a great
Uh,
one.
I'd like to ask you about your personal transformation. I know that, well, now you're living in San Diego, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and every once in a while, and we're friends outside of this, and I, see what you post on Instagram, and sometimes it's like these gorgeous vistas of you, like from you running on the beach of a sunset or sunrise, and you've really incorporated more activity into your life, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, if it's all right with you, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because,
Sure.
as I've shared with you, it's been a personal challenge of mine to uh, to do that, and in a way, you've been an inspiration to me to go down that road because it's something that is not only like personally fulfilling but necessary for all of us. And so I'd like to learn a little bit more about the before and after, like how you started and why you started.
Well, first, thank you for the kind words, and I think, I've you and I've connected in a couple of years, and just kind of monitoring each other's progress, and I know that you've made some tremendous progress towards your goals, and so I want to say congratulations on that. So I know you're working at it. You're also running a company, and so that's a very difficult thing. So you're wearing many hats, plus you have to balance those priorities, and it's difficult. So. I guess, the starting point for me was that, I got up to a pretty scary weight number for myself. I've never really been a super heavy person, but, in the last few years, especially during the pandemic with, all of the gyms closed down, and, we even had parks out here in California, beaches shut down, and it was difficult to kind of string together a run that was away from the road, at least where I lived.
Mm.
And so, I got pretty heavy. I got up to about 250 pounds, and that's the most I've ever weighed in my life. And I just kind of woke up one day, and I just realized that the person I set out to be and the person I was at that moment were so far apart. It was devastating. It really was. And as painful as that was, it was definitely a catalyst for some change. And so, I think on those tough moments when we're honest with ourselves, that's a feature, not a bug. And so the pain that you feel, the dissatisfaction, the worry, that's a good thing if it drives you towards making some healthy changes. And so, I decided I needed to kind of reanimate my body. It was, during the pandemic, we worked a lot. I think our company, like every other company, was worried, what was coming down the pipeline for us. And I worked a lot of hours. We're working, our team was working hard. Our managers and our extended companies were working hard. And, I know for my part, I was putting in 16, 17 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and I was working Saturdays and Sundays. And, you kind of cope with stuff. And so eating bad food, developed a bad relationship with ice cream bars. And so, anyway, I needed to make some changes, and so I started slow, and I would run one day, and when the gyms opened up, I would lift the next day, and I'd rotate back and forth, and I had to be patient with myself because my body was overweight, it was heavy, it was out of shape, and just kind of slowly but surely, added more to those workouts, and I attacked it from the other side too, making some dietary changes. I think one of the hardest things for me because I'm very food motivated. I'm kind of like a dog, so I would purposely eat. I mean, leave myself just a tiny bit hungry. It's like I feel I like I'm filling up, and I'm gonna wait. And then if I was still hungry after that, I eat more. But like that was kind of a big one, kind of changing that relationship I had, and the increased activity. And so over the course of a couple of years, I went from 250 pounds to 175. So I lost a
Wow.
good amount of weight. I feel really, I mean, I feel really good. But I plan my day now around that. So I work out in the morning and I work out in the evening. And so now I have a mixture of cardio and weight training that's part of my daily regimen. I started building in some swimming in there, a lot of surfing on the weekends and things like that. And so the keeping your body moving, even if you're not a jogger, if you're a walker, that's great. Just kind of keeping your body active, don't be sedentary, get up, take a walk, do some push-ups, whatever it is, every little bit matters. And so that's the attitude I took. And it's not always perfect. And try to be as good as I possibly can, but perfection's not the goal, better's the goal. And so that was, what I needed to do. And it was quite a journey. I had to buy all new clothes, which is a good thing, but it's very expensive. But it felt good. It felt good to kind of get a piece of me back from younger years. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I hope an inspiration to people listening in because like you can take you could take where you're at and think that that's where you're always going to be, and then look to where you want to be, and then sometimes that could actually frustrate frustrate you from even starting. I've struggled sometimes with keeping consistent about it. And how do you like is there something that you do that helps you to be consistent? Is it just a matter of putting in the time every day that makes you do it the next day? Like what what is that for you?
Well, I had to look at my weaknesses, and so I'm very food motivated. I'm usually pretty hungry all the time. But I would do little things, and so I would kind of replace foods, and I wouldn't say no to like absolute no's to everything. It's like I'm never going to eat cake ever again in my life, until I get to this goal. What I would do is like, I'd find some other things that I enjoyed. Kind of experiment with cuisine, different things that were healthy, and I would fill it in and say, I'm not going to eat less. I'm just going to eat better, and that's a big part of it right there. There's like our food that we have out there is designed to taste really good because people want to sell us more food. And so those cakes taste tremendous for a reason. And so I kind of had to change that relationship. So I think part of it is one, just consistency and activity was big for me. The other one was attacking it from the other end and, kind of just trying to eat better all around. And one of the big things, I know you travel a lot for work, and man, that's a tough one. Eating on the road, healthy is tough. And so one of the things I do, I go to Costco and I buy a lot of protein bars and I bring those with me. And so if I'm getting between meals and I know I'm getting hungry and like I know I'm at a hotel, I know I'm at a conference, and I know they just put out like 2,000 donuts for everybody to try, I'm gonna go have one of those protein bars. And so if I still want the donut after I have that protein bar, well, we'll negotiate later. But I have found that if you can kind of control those times in your week, and for me, that's one of those times when I'm hungry and that kind of food shows up and it looks so good. It does. If I can give myself an alternative, that was kind of my answer to it. So I kind of had to play into my weaknesses a little bit, and it's tough for me to say no to food. I think most people are like that, and I over the time, when I was stressed, it kind of became a stress eater, and so that was another thing I would do is like, why don't we go do 30 push-ups instead of going to get that bagel? Try that first. If you still want the bagel after that, go get it. But I found more often than not, if I could do 30 push-ups, or if I could go do some crunches or something like that, when I was feeling stressed, I really just needed a break. If I was putting in some long hours, I just needed to take a step back. And if I could go for a walk, and get outside of my own head, I wasn't using that as a crutch to eat more. And that was kind of my weakness, is that I was using it as a break. I was using it as a stress release, but also we were working so hard. Things were tough, and it was just a moment of pleasure, just a moment of levity in a really challenging day.
One thing I'm curious about is that you've had this growth personally in kind of dialing in these habits and being consistent about your physical regimen and like your diet and like what you're eating, like not diet in the sense of like being on a diet, but just being more intentional in what you're eating. So with those choices, like has that impacted your professional side at all? Like has that discipline, or has the consistency that you brought to your personal life has that bled over to your professional life, and what have you learned from that?
I think I've always been pretty disciplined, professionally. That started back in college, grad school, and things like that. But kind of the new spin on it is that I think I've learned to be a little more patient with myself through that process of, kind of onboarding some new behaviors. And one of the things that it's kind of bringing out is like, I just re-engineered my diet, just re-engineered a lot of activity. What can I do to sort of re-engineer my work? How can I make it better, more efficient? And so one of the things that my goal for New Year's is to be more mindful. And so, I think sometimes we get caught up in moments and events and we're talking with people and we're kind of missing the forest from the trees, right? And so that's one of the things that I want to get better at. And so I'll give you an example. We launched our show. We had for the Innocence Show. Back then, it was called the California Innocence Project podcast. But anyway, we were launching, and it was part of a book launch too. So we had this big party over in Liberty Station here in San Diego in the harbor, and the California Innocence Project they did a wonderful job putting it together. And we were at this wonderful party. We all kind of like a bunch of us got up and talked a little bit, and there's just tremendous people there. And I really needed to take a look around the room and make sure that I was talking with everybody. And I regret that. I don't regret who I talked to because I talked with some wonderful people, but there was an opportunity there to kind of float around the room and get to know people I didn't already know. And, I missed that moment. And that's just a small example. But that after that, I was like, man, there was just a bunch of great people there that I didn't even get to talk to. And because I wasn't mindful, I wasn't taking a step back and seeing the bigger picture. And so that's something that I want to work on. And so I think kind of answering your question, what did you learn from some of this process? And I think for me, it was seeing the bigger picture. Sometimes the day to day is too much to look at. It's, am I doing better week to week? Am I doing better month to month? See the big picture. And so that's my 2024 goal is to be more mindful. And I think that comes as a direct stem from some of these other changes.
Yeah, I think I could probably be more mindful too. Um, in
You're
making
pretty
like
mindful, Tom. You seem pretty mindful.
I mean, in making intentional choices, like one thing that I need to be better at, but using Sundays, for example, as a way of looking back on the last week, seeing what's been accomplished, and then actually having a strategy for the coming week. That's one thing that I've found that has brought some, in a way, kind of a peace, like a peaceful mindset to approaching that week, because rather than stepping into the chaos on Monday morning, you have an idea of, the outline of what you'd like to accomplish. And, you may not, accomplish it exactly the way you have in mind. You might not, check all the boxes and what you want to accomplish, but at least you have a game plan. And sometimes having a game plan is the difference.
Yeah, I think that's smart. It seems like when you see the big challenge coming, it doesn't seem so insurmountable because you don't feel like you're getting run over by it. You feel like, all right, I at least control my approach to this. It's coming. I can't stop it from coming, but at least I can do things before it gets here.
So we can't talk in 2024 without mentioning AI.
Okay.
It's it's everywhere. It's in everything, and everybody's talking about it constantly, multiple times a day. Um, the take I'd like to get from you, what I'd like to uh, hear your insight about, is how you think it's changing, what you do in content creation and all of that. Do you think that fundamentally this is a good thing? Do you think it's going to generate a lot of, spammy content in the short term? Like, do you think this is an advantage for us, or what are your thoughts about AI?
Well, I think I think we're looking at one of these sweeping changes in our economic circumstance, and so I think it's every bit as impactful, as mass production. When the first factories came out, the steam engine, that kind of thing. This is remarkable, and so and granted, we're just in the very 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 beginning of it, and people are already creating some amazing products out there based on it. Like I mentioned, my friend Sean, he creates a book writing service called Movable Type, and I'm not trying to do a plug for him, but for people that want to check this out, it's pretty interesting. You can get on there and without authorship expertise or being a great writer, you can write your own book, your own subject matter expertise book, and so that's something that empowers somebody that didn't currently have a skill set, and gives them that access. And so I just think there's so many tasks it's going to be very good at. And I think we have to be good craftsmen. It's a new tool, and we have to, as craftsmen, learn how to wield it. And so we're just at the very, very beginning, but I do think it's going to be a transformational time. A lot of these tasks that, frankly, probably aren't worth our time are going to get done in an automated way, and that frees up our time to think about higher level functions. And so I do think there's going to be some difficulty in the transfer here because we're going to have to learn how to keep up with the advancements. And since I was born and since I got to high school and college and grad school, and now, the one thing I've noticed about the technology curve is that the rate of change just keeps increasing. So we're constantly having to keep up with things, and it feels like it's a race. Can I keep up? Can I stay relevant? Because everything keeps changing so quickly. And so I think it's a net good thing. And I think it's up to us to learn how to use it. I do think that there needs to be some awareness because it reflects who we are because we're building it. I think we need to be socially aware of the implications. And so I've had some conversations about this with other people that work on law technology. And I've talked with Jack Newton, who's a wonderful expert at this, of course, the CEO, founder of Clio. Um, he had a great example for it, talking about spreadsheets and accountants and how spreadsheets didn't put accountants out of business. It blew the business up because people were able to do more things. And I think that's true. I also asked him about, who makes a decision about what artificial intelligence prioritizes and how it learns and the information it gives back to us and the work product it does versus it doesn't do, the decisions that it makes. And, Jack told me, he's like, it's a reflection of us. And so I think the cautionary tale there, when we start talking about the law and we start talking about artificial intelligence helping us with that and casework and legal work, is that we need to make sure that the decisions it makes are representative of who we are and not one person or a group of people or this advocate versus that advocate. And I think that that's something that we all need to be very careful with because as it gets more knowledgeable and capable, it might be that it embodies decision making process or, to the degree it can, morality from a very limited viewpoint. And so I think we all have to learn about it and we all have to dabble in it. And I think we have to keep an eye on it. And I don't think I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it's one of those things that we want to make sure that as we grow, that we're growing in a direction that still suits all of us.
I totally agree with that. And I think that one of the advantages that it provides to us when done well is that it makes transparent the biases, that it allows us to select from them or to minimize certain, hopefully all biases, but to make it so that it reflects the best of us. Um, and we have to be honest with ourselves that when we as human beings, even human judges, they have their own biases. And when you look at different decisions that are being made, sometimes they're being made for, you know, um, haphazard reasons, and they're not always consistent. So at least if we have transparency and consistency, I think that consistency, by the way, is a big theme of in talking with you. Um, but as long as we have that, um, we can make the choices for ourselves and be our best selves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's interesting. Sometimes we get to look at ourselves in strange mirrors.
Yeah. And speaking of that, looking into a mirror, like when you look back on your career and the different choices that you've made from law school to, ultimately becoming the executive producer of the Legal Talk Network and your interest in the California Innocence excuse me, new name now for the California Innocence Project.
Oh,
But
for the innocent, for the innocent. Oh,
for
for
the
the innocent podcast, the new name of for is the Innocent Center. That's the group.
okay. With all of these interests that you've been involved in, like, is there anything that you would done differently? Like, is there, like, if you were able to talk to your younger self, is there any advice that maybe you would give yourself about roads to avoid or, wiser choices to make, or What do you think you tell yourself?
Not to be pulling wisdom from Instagram posts, but but I did see one, from and the handle I think is called Build Alpha. I really like it. That's some great sayings on there. And one of the things I thought about was that it said, if you eliminate all the mistakes and pitfalls in your life, you would not be the person who you are today. And so I think the only thing I would tell myself, because I wouldn't want to be the spoiler in it, um, is that, whatever you do, just go passionately forward and confidently so, because it's part of the journey. Not to repeat myself, but mistakes and setbacks and failure and getting back up again, it's part of life. It's a feature, not a bug. All right. And so it makes us who we are. And it gives us resilience. And I think without those things, imagine where you would have been if things were so easy. Would it mean as much? Would today mean as much as it did if you had made a bunch of mistakes along the way?
That's great advice. I mean, our mistakes, they make us who we are, just as much as the successes do.
Agreed.
We're coming towards the end of this. I just wanted to I guess open it up. Like if there's any advice that you would have to listeners about their careers, what they should focus on, where they should place their energy, and what do you think? Like, what would you share with them about that?
Uh, yeah, I don't know if this is the Southern Californian in me talking, but I would say pursue your passions. I mean, there's something out there that makes you happy. You may not understand why, but you really like it. And I say, if you got an itch like that, explore it. If somebody told you at one time in your life, hey, that's not your skill set, but you love doing it. I say scratch that itch. I mean, are you going to regret trying something you really enjoy, even if you're not really good at it, at the end of your days? And I think that that's probably the advice I have is, live your life in a way that on your deathbed, are you going to have regrets? If you can minimize those regrets, I think you did okay.
And for yourself, do you have any upcoming like professional projects or personal goals that you'd like to share with us?
Let's see here. Personal goals. So I am chasing a pull-up record. So I'm doing that. So my lifetime best is 38. Today I got up to 31. So I don't know why I want to do this. And maybe it's just because it's so difficult. I just want to do it. And so I don't know. That's just a personal goal. A professional goal. I'm really enjoying some of the work I'm doing right now. And with I'm working with this the Innocent Center doing the For the Innocent podcast, but recently been dabbling in a little bit of mini documentaries. And so I really like that space. It's not something that takes a tremendous amount of time to do. We're talking like years of production. But I'm really enjoying that, kind of getting into video projects again. So maybe that's a professional goal, kind of short term.
And so one thing I ask all of my guests is what makes it worthwhile for you?
Oh, well, there's a lot on this one. I've been recently featuring exonerees, and so I have the great privilege, and I'm very grateful out there to the Innocent Center for inviting me to come along and trusting me with this, especially the executive director Michael Samanchik. And so invites me along, gives me the itinerary, gets me a press pass, and I get to go and get behind the scenes, and I get to talk with these exonerees out there that are been behind bars for decades, and we get to talk with them and learn from them and then I get to learn about the process, but accompanying them on the journey. We usually go up on the Amtrak. It's usually in Los Angeles, and so we go up from San Diego and we take the coaster up there and get off at the train station. And so anyway, it's a whole day thing, and I get to tag along and record. And so I love it because we get to tell a story, and I love it because we get to bring it to life, and you get to see the people it happens to. I think it's one thing to read about it. It's one thing to to even like hear about it, but to see somebody, to see their face when they're become free and to see their family celebrate the moment they're exonerated, and they start to get their life back. It's really rewarding to spread that out there and to build awareness. It just to help with that in some like small way. It means a lot. It means a lot. So that's why it's important to me.
Yeah, so that's amazing. I can't imagine what it's like to be in the room there when they find out that they're free.
Well, I tell you what, I'll talk with the executive director, and next time they get the call, if you want to come down, maybe I'll ask him. Maybe he'll invite you.
Oh wow, that would be amazing. Well, Lawrence, I just want to thank you so much for your time. spending it with us and sharing your insights and wisdom, really, about your career and your life. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me on, Tom.
One last thing I want to ask you is, how can people keep in touch with you and learn more?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, so just Laurence Colletti, Colletti, Lawrence spelled with the U. And then I'm at Lawrence ESQ short for Esquire on both Twitter and Instagram. So I'm pretty easy to find there. I'm trying to get into TikTok more. I'm just not the best TikToker.
Yeah, me either. But but hopefully we'll both grow our following on TikTok too. Well, thanks again, and thanks to all of you for listening to or watching our podcast on LawDroid Manifesto. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.